Nigeria, like most other countries in Africa, now has a democratic government, quote and unquote. How can ordinary citizens, I mean, like that, the woman in that market in the sun selling mangoes with a baby strapped on her back, has two other children at home of school age, who are not in proper schools, or, who are in government schools that are not well run, or even completely out of school. Her husband is out there, maybe, working as a gardener somewhere, also, struggling just so that they can make ends meet for their family. How do these people get to now compel our so-called democratically elected government to see that this neoliberal agenda is not beneficial to us? How can we compel them, to make a shift from this ideology towards one which incorporates more social justice?
But the issue, first of all, is that we must interrogate the whole idea that indeed there is some democracy in Africa. That we even have a full-blown democracy. Because I am very convinced that part of the reason why it is very possible for the international financial, capital and investors to actually hijack, our societies is because our governments are not democratic. They have elections regularly, and the fact that you have periodic elections does not necessarily make you a democracy. Fayed Zakaria, the guy that runs GPS, Global Public Sphere, on CNN, had actually written an article a long time ago, which was titled "Illiberal Democracies," and it says there are democracies, or there are societies around the world where you have elections regularly, and yet those same countries, routinely violate the human rights of their citizens. He says those are not democracies. They are pseudo, quasi democracies or illiberal democracies. And so the first challenge for Africans is to see that indeed we entrench real democracy in Africa. And it will require, like you said, that we galvanize the grassroots people to ensure that when elections are coming, they are fully involved in the political process. If I collect money, or somebody collects money and then votes for some charlatans, that's no democracy. That's a caricature of democracy.
Because I wanted to say that they are involved in elections. Those people at the grassroots level. It's just that they are being used. They are the ones who go and line up on the days of elections in the sun. These same grassroots people. But they're the ones who are waylaid by the political parties, giving 4,000 naira, 5,000 naira, depending on what they're giving, or who end up voting for people because maybe they are from the same village, or the child of of a father who used to be a prominent figure. What I'm saying is that they do not link. How do we get them to link, that time she spends in the sun, eking and earning that is not enough to sustain her family or ensure her children's education? How do we get them to link that to, to them coming out to line up on election day and then using their votes, to get these people to compel them to serve them instead of these global war powers? Because on the long run, it is not in the interest of the neocolonizers for our governments to work well. From what it's looking like, corruption, which is already a problem with us, if the problem of corruption is solved and we actually have responsible leaders there, they are less likely to keep pursuing this neoliberal agenda. So nobody's going to fight for us.
Actually, I was going to touch on that issue. Really, to enlighten, and you use the word, they're using these people. to
Yeah.
manipulating them. Now, there's something that happened when this COVID started. People were saying, where are all those politicians who were bringing money during the elections? Because they all simply disappeared. Now, the point is that, yes, we need to be able to educate those who are the grassroots to see how their predicament is connected to wrong policies that are imposed on us by, you know, international financial institutions who have their own agenda,
Mm.
which is completely detrimental and different from the agenda of the people who are on ground. They need to know that. And the political parties would have done us a lot of, you know, what do you call it now? Giving us, they would have done a lot of good if they are on ground to do the education, because they are the ones that actually educate the electorate. But unfortunately, we don't have such political parties in this part of the world. Most of the political parties we have do not have ideologies. They are just concerned about, you know, financial opportunities in government. And because we don't have such parties, political parties couldn't do the job unless, of course, there's a way we can, um, you know, catalyze a situation where this such a political party or such political parties will emerge. In the absence of that, we perhaps will have to fall back on our intellectuals, radical intellectuals, who need to now connect town and gown. They must become not just intellectual but also activists who are able to, you know, connect with all the town halls. We have town halls, you know, all over the place, which a lot of the times are actually hijacked and manipulated by the powers that be,
Right.
but
Politicians.
by politicians, to be very specific. But the intellectual, radical intellectuals can still do something in trying to ensure that when you have such town halls, they infiltrate the place. They are on ground. Of course, I understand that sometimes they say strictly by invitation. They invite some people, but at such points, even if you're not invited, we can actually have a set of people who have different opinions who are outside there carrying the placards and all that. That happens when you have climate, you know, change dialogues, and you see the civil society all over out. They weren't invited, but their views, one way or the other, percolates into, you know, the flow of the meeting, and it is in a way considered. So intellectuals have a very big role to play in saying that we educate those who are the grassroots, to see that their plight is heavily connected to policies that are coming from, you know, international financial institutions and from the advanced world.
You mentioned CSOs just now, NGOs, civil society, community based organizations. But there's also the problem that these organizations are very often funded, you know, by countries, the former colonial countries. They are funded from abroad, people whose interests do not necessarily coincide with the interest of the grassroots person in the developing world. And he who pays the piper calls the tune. So these NGOs themselves also have a challenge, because for them to survive, they just have to play along with the people who fund them. You know, how do they find a balance between their need for finances to finance their projects, you know, and these opposing interests of the funders?
The CSOs are actually treading a very delicate ground in the sense that they need to do that balancing that you have mentioned. I think one way they could do this essentially is to ensure that they comply with their funders, but in some way also resist where it is necessary. And they have to do that very incrementally. Any radical departure from the funding body, of course, means that you're going to lose that funding. But beyond that, you know, I think that we must deal more the CSOs in a very, because this is more like a war, and you have to devise a strategy. The CSO may have to look for means of influencing the government on the ground in such a way that it's not as overt as what their funders to see. It's crucial to be able to do that. And beyond that, I think they also have partners overseas who actually have similar, positions with them in terms of saying that we have more justice, more equality across the world. They can also connect with these counterparts overseas to share ideas, experience, and perhaps even get funding. So basically, the point is these civil society organizations have to do what they have to do at the local level in terms of reaching out to the government in a very covert manner, and of course, on the other hand, ensuring that they connect with the counterpart overseas. But where they get funding from, conservative governments, I think they should uh, play in a very subtle manner. Subtle in the sense that we must not be saying to be, because some of this funding we're talking about sometimes is directly allocated to poverty alleviation projects. When that is, why not get that funding and use it? But we always ensure that we do not just allow the government to run policies that counter social justice and will negatively affect poor vulnerable individuals.
Okay, now let's look at the current pandemic that's going on in relation to Africa. Trump calls COVID-19 the Chinese virus. The Chinese say that the Americans brought it to Wuhan when they came for the military games in October 2019. And then there has been some confirmed reports of Chinese blaming Africans for spreading the virus and using it as an excuse to discriminate against Africans in their country. Do any of these allegations have any credence?
It has no credence, it has no basis, because the truth of the matter is that international travel is what is responsible for the spread of this COVID-19 and made it so fast. I mean, one of the things that defines the globalizing world is the advancement in transportation and information technology. And transportation technology has made it easy for us to travel around the world faster than ever before. And that explains why it is that COVID-19 was able to spread across the nation very fast. I think it's a lame argument to say that it's some black people, because different types of people, black, white, yellow, whatever you call them, are traveling around the world. So the second position that globalization is responsible for the spread of COVID-19, it's clearly valid, and the empirical evidence around us to show that that's the case. I mean, that's how it spread around the world, is through international travel. I remember all the cases at the initial that took place in Nigeria where people who traveled abroad who came back. So it is international travel. It has nothing to do with blacks. It has everything to do with different people traveling around the world.
Well, there are speculations that the world economic order might change as a result of this COVID-19. How might the world economic order change, and how might it affect Africa?
We could speculate, but I'm very, very skeptical that we might have any fundamental change take place, after the pandemic. Because what I've seen during the pandemic is ultra nationalism, where nations are simply, focusing on their immediate problem and forgetting about their neighbors and even their regions. And so I don't see that will change as soon as the pandemic is over. Of course, one thing that happens about nations and internationalism, global cooperation, it fluctuates from time to time. At some point, nations will say, okay, let us go. And what is actually happening? Even before now, it's interesting with the rise of Trump, the rise of ultra-nationalist parties in Europe. We've seen a situation where countries are recoiling back into themselves and are becoming more interested in the general welfare of the globe. And so I don't think the pandemic will change that. But look at the competition over vaccines. There is a very steep competition. Everyone is trying to outdo the other. Say, okay, if I can produce vaccine first, that means I make plenty of money. And so it's clear to me that the competition will still be there. It's clear to me that global cooperation will only happen when perhaps that is in the interest of everybody. Now, of course, I also want to think that the spark, so to speak, between China and the USA will go a long way to determine the direction of the global economy. But I tell you, there is so much trade going on between those countries. I think I heard somewhere online that's about $5 trillion trade taking place. So I don't even see any too long a conflict between these two countries. After some time, because of the common interest they have in the common trade and in their investments, they will eventually make up. And then, of course, the global economy runs the way it's been running. So I don't see any fundamental change taking place. That's my position on this matter.
Thank you once again. Thank you so much.